Hello everyone, Ruby Ravel here, the riotous raconteur of romantic red flags, here to talk to you today about Venus square Neptune. Now this aspect is a very good example of how the flavour of the signs in which two planets are aspecting can strongly impact the way in which they relate to one another, because planets in themselves, isolated from their zodiacal environment, do have a natural relationship or kinship with one another, and Venus and Neptune are two planets that ordinarily get along because both of them are related to connecting with one another. Venus says, I want love, I want relationships, I want eroticism, I want pleasure, I want to combine my senses and feelings with someone else to create a really nice experience for everyone involved. And Neptune says, I hear you, sister, but I got one better. I want cosmic love. I want total emotional and spiritual fusion with someone else. I want the boundaries between who is what just to disappear and for us both to become enwombed together in the extraplanetary, esoteric, cosmic void of the very matrix of love itself. And Venus thinks, well, it's a bit heavy, it's a bit full on, but it does sound like in the right context that could also be extremely pleasant. Tell me more. However, when Venus is in Gemini, relating to Neptune in Pisces, the dynamic is a little different. But Venus in Gemini is a very different personification of the goddess of love. She is an airy queen, she is a fairy queen, she is a sprite, a sylph, a spirit of the air. You know, I envisaged her as being this fairy of the winds, of the breezes, who personifies herself as an erratic butterfly or as a missel thrush or a sparrow. You know, one of these birds that can fly but doesn't fly too high. You know, it flits between a tree, between the turret of an old church, to being low in a bush, to hopping on the ground looking for worms, to looking on your patio table. You know, she is a restless goddess, always looking for something new and interesting to excite her. And even though she's an air goddess, she never strays that far from the earth. She's still interested in looking at the everyday, ordinary world, but doing it much more quickly and intensively and with a mercurial variety of interest to tantalize and appease her insatiable curiosity. It's not like the angelic albatross of Venus in Aquarius, who is up there in the heavens looking down on the earth from the elevated perspective. This is someone who is airy but still connected with the everyday mortal realm in some way, whilst also having enough detachment to not completely associate herself with that experience. All air signs value detachment, and that detachment even goes into their relationships with other people, because for them, relating with someone else, you're not just relating to a person, you're relating to a concept, to a series of thoughts and ideas, to, you know, the existence of another person as some kind of intellectual or cerebral ideal which you are saying to balance or have some kind of interaction with. And if you want to have that dynamic interaction with someone, it's much easier for an air sign to connect on that intellectual level, because then you still have some clarity about what's going on and what each side is putting into the situation, and therefore can make analyses about how to change and move and mutate with that situation, because Venus in Gemini is mutable. She believes in relationships not being these static, fixed things like they can be with Venus in Taurus, but in this thing that is always changing shapes and putting on different costumes. It's a relationship that always has to be changing its face and outer garments and outer expression in some way in order to keep it lively and alert and to prevent it from ossifying. You know, it's much easier to keep flying if you maintain your momentum, if you don't give up the speed, if you don't slacken the pace, but keep yourself in all the airy eddies of enthusiasm. But when you are an airy fairy queen who likes to fly and flit about the place, who likes to be able to descend Earth without being tied down to it, the ability to move freely between different relationships and different circles and different experiences in life is very important to Venus in Gemini. It values variety and flexibility over constancy and stability. It wants to have lots of different experiences and lots of different lovers and lots of different relationships that it can all compare and analyze and contrast with one another to give it a slightly more elevated and broader look at the human experience, which helps to mirror its many sides back to itself, because Venus in Gemini experiences herself as being this shape-shifting fairy queen goddess who, as I said in a previous video, has this vast costume department in her soul with all these different characters and acts and persona and different sides of her personality that she can see. And one of the joys of having relationships with other people is that different people offer different opportunities to experiment with expressing different sides of herself. It's almost like she is, well, again, like a fairy or an alien who is incarnated as a human being and is looking at all the different cultures and fashions and diverse ways in which humans experiment with herself, and she can look at them all and say, oh, yeah, I see little bits of me in all of these people. Okay, today I'll try being like that person. Today I'll try being like this person. And that can be confusing for some people who find this never-ending flexibility and this constant change of appearance and personal values and beliefs and opinions very misleading and confusing, because they say one thing and then say totally the opposite the next. And for them, in that moment, all of them are equally true because they are always playing with the dualities and polarities that exist within them. However, unlike other signs, they find it difficult to find the synthesis or balance between those polarities. They find it much easier to kind of zigzag between extremes and to find balance in that interpersonal enantiodromia, rather than saying, okay, I've got these fixed extremes, let's find a point in the middle, because the buzz and excitement of switching between these things, of being one twin and then being the other, of being Castor one moment and Pollux the next, is part of what makes them feel alive, and also keeps their brains alert by their capacity to rapidly shift their perspective and perspective of other people and the people they're in a relationship with at a moment's notice. So, you know, in order to fly, you have to be able to flit about and not allow the people who love you to tie you down. Rather, those people should carry on exciting you and be things that inspire you to keep moving and seeing different shades of life every day, even in just the changes and vacillations and vagaries of pretty banal small details. But Neptune in Pisces is experienced as a threat by Venus in Gemini because he is trying to take her and rapaciously remove her to a realm that is totally contrary to the one in which she feels her power and knows that she is in her element, her airy, interactive, semi-divine, semi-mortal state of mind. You know, because this is one of the parts of the myths of Gemini, is that with Castor and Pollux, one twin was immortal and one was mortal, and it was believed that they would regularly switch who was who, that one would spend some time up in Olympus and then they would have a pole shift and the other one would go down to live among mortals while the other one went back to Olympus. And, you know, part of that constant switching of poles helps to explain why sometimes the Geminian frame of mind can have this kind of manic depressive quality to it, between those periods where it feels like it's flying up in the heavenly heights, and then all the difficulties and mundanities of everyday existence pull it back down again, and it feels temporarily removed from its highly energized power, and yet how that can then ground it and give it a fresher and more human perspective that it can then take into its next pole shift. But none of that involves being near water, so it's almost like, if you imagine again Venus and Gemini as this airy queen, as this sylph who's just flitting around on her little diaphanous wings, going about the gardens, looking at all the people on the street, popping into coffee shops, going into cities and seeing all the crowds, and looking at the magazines and the headlines, and just generally having this buzzing, excited overview of everything that's going on, and all the everyday little changes and pieces of gossip and trivia and exciting news that make her wings keep on flapping at that hummingbird speed. One day she's flying along, and then she goes into her usual garden, and there's a pond there that wasn't there before, and that interests her, and within the pond she sees this beautiful water spirit. She is blue skinned, she has blue hair interwoven with streaks of algae and other pondweed. She rests on a lily pad. She has this beautiful otherworldly expression that is simultaneously serene and yet also filled with an ineffable sorrow that makes no sense to Venus and Gemini, because it speaks of a totally different realm and window of experience to the one that she is inhabiting. And being curious, she naturally thinks, who is this blue-skinned babe? What's her deal? What's her story? Why is she the way that is? And it's the nature of Venus and Gemini to ask why, to ask questions, to be curious, and there's no reason why she shouldn't ask this blue lady who's inhabiting this pond the same as anyone else. So she descends to see what's happening. And as she gets closer, tantalized by this mysterious being, this mysterious water spirit, the pond gets bigger and bigger and bigger, until by the time she's come close to it, it has turned into this enormous ocean that is now enclosing her from 360 degrees. Whichever way she looks, it is there. And she thinks, where the hell am I? Just a moment ago I was in my ordinary world, going about my usual routines, snooping on people and finding out what the goss was, and now here I am out to sea in this mysterious realm where there are no obvious patterns that I can analyze, where the waves are always changing and never the same twice. And this water sylph tries to pull her down into the ocean. And she thinks, if I let this happen, if I surrender to this water sylph, who is so beautiful and tantalizing and mysterious, but also, it seems like she might be a bit of a wet blanket as well, which Venus and Gemini has no time for. What happens then? And of course, if she does get pulled under, she can't fly anymore. Her wings that she is so reliant on become completely waterlogged. And far from being in this realm where she feels like she can hover and flit above everyone without being anchored and weighed down like everyone else, she's instead taken into this oceanic realm where she is at the mercy of these higher cosmic, emotional and spiritual forces that she doesn't really understand. Instead of feeling excited, instead of feeling that nervous buzz that keeps her pulsing along in accordance with all the excitement of her life, instead she is in this zone where time and space no longer exist, where all her little thoughts and insights and everyday questions are just clogged and flooded by the weight and intensity of the emotions and the empathy and the sensitivity that she now overwhelmingly feels. And on the one hand, she needs that experience in order to deepen her, in order to expose her to a more emotionally overwrought, expansive and all-encompassing experience of life than can be experienced by remaining within a pretty slim and trivial intellectual lens. And which can therefore help her to understand people better and enrich her mind by deepening it, but also by challenging her to go beyond her mind, to say that your mind isn't everything, your intellect isn't everything, staying interested and amused and having fun conversations isn't everything, that there is a deeper side to life full of suffering and mystery and wonder and horror, of euphoria and nightmares, and Neptune has pulled you into it, whether you want to go into it or no. And while she needs that experience, as I keep saying, she's also lost her power there. She doesn't feel her mind is working as usual. She doesn't feel that she's glib or can have the gift of the gab, because she has been taken into a realm that is so foreign to her everyday experience that it would be like if we were just sat down normally and then suddenly taken to the bottom of the ocean or taken into outer space. We would find our normal autonomy and capacity for dealing with situations being taken totally beyond us. And sometimes this experience can be so extreme and overwhelming for Venus and Gemini that it actually makes her sick. And instead of buzzing around, socializing and going on regular trips to different places and always keeping a million different tabs open, she suddenly feels that actually she needs to withdraw, she needs to hide away, that she can't cope with facing life and other people when she's in this state. Now, as I've said in other videos, very often during squares, when there is such a conflict between the energies and designs of an inner planet and the greater cosmic demands of the outer planet that it's interfacing with, it's not unusual for there to be this split between the two planets, for us to try and identify and cling more solidly to the one, and then to project the other out there into the world, either as another person or as a series of experiences and events that try and inflict that realm upon us. So, just to give a totally made-up scenario that could play out in any number of ways, if we imagine someone identifying more with Venus and Gemini, where they're going about their life, where they're feeling very social and excitable and curious and just able to connect with everyone and have good, insightful, interesting, analytical conversations with everyone, and nice, inspiring conversations with a diverse range of people, but without their emotions getting in their way. And maybe in their love life, it's very much the same. They're feeling very, very carefree, very easy come, very easy go. Maybe I'll be with this person one night, or maybe they are in a monogamous connection and they're just feeling very happy about it and enjoying it, and it's all very light and breezy. And then maybe someone that they're involved with becomes very Neptunian, becomes very intense, that they've gone from being this person that they could easily relate to on this glib intellectual level to suddenly being someone who is in an emotionally intense and overwhelmed state, who's feeling very needy, who is saying, Venus and Gemini, I want you to overcome your cognitive detachment and become more close and intimate with me, to be emotional and present with me. To let your guard down and just be totally codependent with me, and to experience some kind of spiritual fusion. Or, that needy Neptunian person may even be asking for some kind of healing or deep, close emotional nourishment and support from the Venus and Gemini person, who suddenly feels that this is getting a bit too deep, this is getting a bit too intense, this was fun for a moment, and now what was a light, breezy affair is now trying to pull me into the depths. I'm not sure I want to go there. I'm not sure that's really what my heart wants or is looking for. You know, it might try and just end up avoiding that connection altogether. And of course, that doesn't just have to play out in a romantic relationship. That can play out in any experience that seems to be taking us out of a more light and flighty relationship with life, and pulling us into these situations where we have to lose control, where things are emotional and messy and blurred and confusing, and where instead of feeling like we are flying above the town and having this nice higher perspective on things, instead we just feel really overwhelmed and don't really know what's going on, and have all kinds of dreams and mystical sensations and intense yearnings and longings clogging us and obstructing us, and just making us feel that we are not the mistresses of either our own minds or hearts, but that something else is at play as well. But on the other side, we might identify more with the Neptunian side of things, of feeling in this place of deep emotion and sorrow and compassion, and being very spiritually elevated, and having this approach to life where, instead of feeling the need to explain everything rationally and intellectually and to use that to give us the illusion that we are somehow always in control of life if we have a logical explanation for it, Neptune much more has the philosophy that it is willing to surrender to and have faith in the greater designs of the universe. It says, instead of always feeling like I have to control everything intellectually, I am willing to accept the fact that life is mysterious, that it is numinous, that it is ineffable, that we get glimpses here and there as through a glass darkly about what it's all about through dreams and prophecies and fated emotional encounters with other people. But ultimately, it's a bit like a fish rising to the surface of the ocean, having a brief look at the expanse of sky and then being pulled back down into those tidal waves again, you know? All we ever have is these little sparks and epiphanies in an ocean of ignorance and unknowing and confusion. And Neptune says, I will get the best from life if, instead of being attached to my ego and my own designs and my own intentions, and just looking at things from the pettiness of my own small heart, which is just looking for its own pleasure and stimulation, that I sacrifice my feelings to a higher power which I may not necessarily understand, that I give myself up and my heart for other people instead of just making it all about myself and whatever keeps me feeling curious and alive, that sometimes we have to be willing to give up those things and sacrifice our own values so that we can fulfill our higher purpose or be meaningfully there for other people. And, you know, Neptune may see this flighty Venus in Gemini and feel some jealousy towards her. You know, it feels like it would be a much easier and more comforting way to live, and that there is a beauty in that, in having that graceness and that lightness and that fleet-footedness that is so different from the oceanic heaviness of how Neptune experiences herself. And you know, she kind of reaches out to Venus in Gemini and says, hold me, please, merge with me. I want to psychically interfuse with you so I know who you are, so that I feel every last part of your being. And when Venus in Gemini says, well, actually, I've got a million other things to do that are considerably less emotionally demanding, then the Neptune feels rejected, wounded and hurt and let down, and feels resentment towards Venus in Gemini's ability just to be present, because it's trying to be 1,000 places at once. And when you have that pull between Venus and Neptune moving in different directions, that's when it's very easy for the disillusionment aspect of Neptune to play out, to feel like we've been misled in our perceptions of someone that we've loved, that maybe instead of just seeing them on a human, ordinary, everyday level, we have elevated them into between this god, into being this envoy or goddess who is meeting us as an ambassadress from another world, and therefore feeling like they have to be this divine fantasy that is perfect, instead of just accepting them for who they are. And losing our illusions about someone, seeing the human, the warts, poke through the divine mask we projected on them can be a deeply hurtful experience, and especially when two parties can often be complicit in that role of making things more fantastical than they actually are. But also, it's not unusual for this aspect to align with periods where we feel the need to isolate ourselves, to withdraw, to go away from our normal everyday life, and to sink more deeply into our emotions so that we can go back to it and have a greater feeling of where we are. You know, sometimes that we need to have some kind of grieving process where we let go of our boundaries and we release all the deep things that we've been holding on to, so that we can have this emotional, spiritual, psychic purge, and then enter back into the flow and breeze of life again, feeling that we have gotten a lot of things off our chest and are now able to go back to that flightier, more enjoyable way of relating with our everyday lives. Anyway, that was all very cosmic and intense. Make of that what you will. Who knows? Did it make sense to you? I don't know. I enjoyed telling the story. You connect the dots. I give them to you. And we all scrabble over the floor looking for those dots, seeing where they land, and making some kind of Rorschach blot projection over what we think it all means. That's astrology. Anyway, if any of you want to get in touch with me during these Mercury retrograde times, please do. My email is thestarsunraveled@outlook.com. My Instagram is astrology and underwear, and my Patreon is www.patreon.com/thestarsunraveled. If you've forgotten those dates and names, they'll all be in the information link below. I will be making a video shortly about Mars's trine to Neptune, which has a slightly easier, though equally weird relationship with that outer planet, and there will also be one about the Sun's conjunction with Uranus, so lots of goodies to look forward to.